Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Knights, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. And if you want to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today, we are doing chapter 45 of The World Which Is. The next morning's travel, you know what, is quiet. I'm not gonna condense both. Still no buff from a good night's sleep. When I asked Brendan what I'd have to do to get it over breakfast, he replied I'd have to invest in a much better quality bed as well as a magical tent, since it isn't just the bed that governs getting those buffs. Ellen didn't say anything then or after. I think our discussion unsettled her. Like, she can't understand how I'm not interested in becoming famous, how being a lowly guard is enough for me. I guess growing up in a city like Toronto, instead of a tightly knit community like Court, leads to different expectations out of life. After a few hours, Brandon goes from heading mostly westward to entirely south. Is there a problem? I ask him. Like me, he has the direction sensibility, but he's been to Detroit before. So, where I get nothing when I think of that city, he knows exactly in what direction it is. Just like if I think of Court, I can turn to face it and know that if I walk in that direction, I'll I'll eventually find myself there. For him to change direction means he's noticed something. We're getting close to the nation of the people, he replies. Are they people we want to avoid? He looks at me in surprise. No, they're fine people. Only get pissy if you try to boss them around. They have a history of being pushed her. If you try to boss them. Hmm. Only get pissy if you try to okay, if you get bossy. If you get bossy with them. Um, they have a history of being pushed around by those in power before the system. So they don't take well to anyone who tries. Now that they're able to be their own people again. The problem is that the trade road passes through their town and there's a market, which means my picture and the amount Xander will pay for my journal will have circulated. Yeah, like I said, the people are nice enough folks, but it's a town and there's no way to know who there won't be like the others. You know, you'd know about that, Ellen says in a sharp tone. Brandon closes his eyes and grinds his teeth. For a moment, I think that after the morning's peace, this will make him blow up. But he lets out a breath and gives me a, you know I'm doing this for you, right? Look. I give him an encouraging smile in return, and he rolls his eyes. If we cross well before we reach it, if um okay, if we cross well, okay, that doesn't quite work. Um okay. Well, reach the road all east of the town. Might have to wait for a gap between caravan, but then we can cross unnoticed and go around. Go the long way around. The road comes into view with the sun high. So we have lunch under the cover of the forest while the caravan passes. Once we can't see them and there isn't another one visible approaching, we run across and lose ourselves among the trees. The forest quickly turns into marshland, and we're all soaked to the knees, with Ellen being wet and dirty from tripping. It takes a solid glare on my part to keep Brandon from commenting, while Silver helps her. When we reach a river, she dunks herself under as we cross it. As we cross it, as we cross it, then changes into a dry set with a dry set of clothing without slowing us. Slowing us. As the sun reaches the horizon, we top a steep hill, and I stop as I see the town of. Was it really called the Nation of the People, or did they just think of it as a nation and not a town in the distance? All right, if I'm going to do that, how? You know what? I'm leaving it like that right now. I don't care. Regardless, it is a site. It's big. I mean, really big. I can't see the wood palisade as it winds around in nothing resembling a circle. As it winds around, as it winds around and away in nothing resembling a circle. The most striking element after that is how empty it looks. Oh, there are buildings and a good number of them, but there is so much space between them. There are clusters here and there, but otherwise it's a lone building with plenty of space before another. There might be small fields here and there next to some houses, but that seems to be an exception. What do they do with all that space? Silver asks with awe in her voice that echoes how I feel. I know, right? If I climb on the palisade in court and look over my town, all I see are rooftops with space for rows and the occasional yard. It's lighter closer to the wall as that hasn't been filled with houses yet, but we don't stretch it out. We don't stretch out like they have. Brendan, how come they're so spread out? No idea. Never thought to ask when I traveled through before. Emotion westward. Come on, we want to put some distance before we stop for the night. The hunting parties should all be back inside before the sun disappears, but people out here have a habit of thinking that anyone they cross who isn't on the road is out for no good. He grins at me. Unless you think you want to practice fighting against them, it's not a good idea to have them walk in on your camp. Walk in. Walk. It's not a good idea to have them walk into our camp. We walk into another forest when we barely have enough light to see the trees, and Brandon has us continue for a while with the light of his crystal to navigate by. When we reach a clearing, we make camp. Dinner is dried bear meat and water. Then Alan and Silver huddle for magical discussion, and while Brandon leans back against, you know what, leans against a tree with a book in his hand. Is that a different book? I ask. Yeah, he looks at the cover. I finished the history of the Appalachian last night. Who are they? They were the people they were what people called the native who lived in those mountains well before the system arrived. But the book is about the mountains themselves. Why are you reading about mountains? And in a book from before the system, it looks old, and with being able to access information from the system directly, there aren't a lot of books being written anymore. Dad's always complaining about how we're going to lose our history this way. But it's just a question of asking the right questions, so I don't see his concern. For research? Why bother researching that? Isn't your build about fighting? Well, ignoring that you never know what kind of detail from the past that will lead you to a ruin, it's easy experience. Why wouldn't I do it? How is reading experience? He stares at me. Haven't you looked at your class? Yes. He looks at me expectantly, so I bring up, where could there be anything about experience by reading? Well, there's only one section in my sheet that has anything that gives experience, so I bring up my active quest. So I bring up my active quests. And this is, this is what happens with me, that this is why reading out loud works for me. I move this, and I barely realized it when I said it. I bring up my difficult. I was starting on the next line when I realized that it's what that I did not say it where it was. So yeah. Dennis Carpenter's active quest. Aaron's last will and testament. Aaron has asked you to deliver a private letter to his wife in Kansas City. Rewards on accepting the quest. Partial unlock of Aaron's never-ending journal. Gain the ability to bind Aaron's never-ending journal to yourself. On completion, 26,324 experience, 2 ability point, 4 skill points, and 2 spell point. Consequence of refusal or failure, none. Ruin Explorer Quest, Step 2. Have discovered 2 ruins. An explorer always finds the discovery of a ruin rewarding. Reward 4,563 experience. Cache Explorer Quest. Step 2. Have found 2 caches. Sometime, finding a hidden cache can be a reward in and of itself. Rewards 4,563 experience. Research Explorer Quest. Step 1. Research one subject. The past isn't always contained within the ruins. Sometimes it is in tomes that the rewards lay. Rewards 2,197 experience. Fighting Explorer Quest 3. Quest Step 3. Have fought 6 different creatures. The explorer doesn't only learn in dusty tomes and through ancient ruins. They also have something to learn from the creatures in the world, the creatures of the world. Rewards 6,929 experience. If it's supposed to be in my quest, I don't see anything about reading. Really? You don't have a research quest? Yes, but what you're doing isn't research, I reply. Research is about trying to learn about something in depth, not just reading a book. I'm not just reading, Brendan replies. I'm learning about the Appalachians. It's one subject, and when I'll be done, I'll know it quite well. Come on. There's no way the system counts that. The fact that I'm working on step 9 of my research quest says it does. But I've gone over the maps in Aaron's journal often enough. I can probably draw a few from memory, and that quest is still on its first step for me. Maps aren't a subject, but they're a good place to start from, especially maps from another explorer, since all the places he marked on them are places of interest. So someone will have written a book about them. Researching places you plan on going is always to your advantage beyond advancing the quest. But I'm not planning on exploring ruins. I'm going to be a guard. It gives me an amused look. Okay, but even then, it's an ability point for every 4 steps. Do you really want to say no to that? He offers. He's offering that. He offers me a book. I take it. Lord Dorchester, man behind Toronto. I raise my frown from it to Brampton. What use do I have for something that had to have happened years before the system in Toronto? Centuries, he corrects. And the use is advancing your quest. The system doesn't care if the information is useful or not, just that you learn it. He opens his book. Word of warning, it knows if you've learned something or not. So you need to actually read what's there, not just skim it like it's a random system query. The book is kind of thick. I'm not getting through this anytime soon. Where did you even get this? At the club, before we left. I always leave the books I'm done with and pick up new ones. And they let you just leave with them? I open the book and squint. Why is this written so small? One of the perks of being a member of the club, which you are, I'll remind you. I'll just give this back to you when I'm done, if I ever get done. If it's all written this small and a quick flip through shows it is, I may not be done by the time I'm back in court. Sure, he smiles. I have a satchel full of book you can read afterwards. And this concludes chapter 45 of The World Which Is. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter is going to be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the story It is up for free on Royal Road. If you want to read ahead of that and support me in the process, that is on my Patreon. We are about 10 chapters ahead there. And if you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the note. And with that, I shall wish you a good day.